All right, hello, 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 hello. I'm Ethan Alexanian. I host that one other show with the name that I can't remember. Uh, yeah, this is a very last minute kind of ordeal, but some of the best things happen very last minute. So they say. I don't know who they say is, but you know, see, I'm trying to keep some consistency with my other show, and so in order to keep things consistent, I don't know what I'm talking about. But that's besides the point. Uh, I've brought back someone from the show's past, or he brought me back. Because
Yes, I'm the instigator
you
here.
you are the instigator. We didn't know we were gonna do this until last
A couple of
night.
hours ago.
Yeah,
Oh, last night, right. You're right. You're right.
yeah. I was on a live stream and I was being quite rude. Being on Facebook Messenger. They
Well,
thought
hey,
they thought they were boring me to sleep.
listen, today is Ramiversary,
Today
the
is the
50th.
Ramiversary.
I couldn't be more excited. I love Ram so much, and I thought, who would be more fun to talk about this with than Ethan Alexanian?
Aw,
Well,
thank
hey,
you.
I mean,
I
I,
am
I have
Mr.
a lot of
Fun.
friends that love this album, but I don't know how many of my friends could talk about it, you know, track by track and just obsess over it the way we could.
Mhm. I think you're overestimating though how good I am at talking about things. I've appeared on a couple other shows where I've gone through albums track by track, and I got called a smarmy, pretentious guy the last time I tried to talk about McCartney too.
Well, that surprises me because it doesn't sound to me like the Ethan Alexanian I know, you know?
Well, I wasn't exactly firing on all cylinders that day.
Well, hey, we all have days where we might not be at our absolute best, but then we have days where we're on fire. Isn't that right?
That is right.
And
And
I think McCartney is a great example of that.
I just realized I haven't introduced you yet. Although most of my listeners, or, I'll explain for some of the less literate ones, because your name's going to be right in the title.
Right, indeed.
Joining me is, I don't remember what episode you were on, but, you were episode 50 something of Fans on the Run, Max Comeau.
Right.
Welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me back.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yes. Thank you for jumping in on my instigation.
Sure, I'm not doing much these days. Ever since I went down to one show every 2 weeks, which
Right.
feels extremely bizarre. Mister at 1.2 shows a week, and that's
Right.
how I cheated my way to 50 episodes in like three
Right. In a
seconds.
flash.
Exactly.
But it's great to have a ton of content out there as well because when one discovers a new podcast and they enjoy it, I don't know about most people, but I know I like to binge listen, like I'll listen to two or three in a row
Mhm.
on the night that I discover a podcast and go like, oh man, I like this guy's approach or this girl's approach or whatever.
And I assume that would have been made quite easy by the fact that I would not stop putting out content.
There you go. There you go.
But that's besides the point. We're here to talk about Ram.
Indeed.
So, Max,
1971, May 17th, 1971, 9 years before I was on the planet, and what, like 20 years before you were?
uh, I think it's about 30,
There, right, there
30,
you go.
31 years before I was here.
Well, there you go. It's incredible. And
Yeah,
and we're still excited about an album that came out at a time when we weren't even on this planet.
Ram brings people together.
It does.
That's one thing. I don't think you could say that about Wildlife.
No, indeed. You
No.
couldn't say that about Press to Play. You couldn't say that even about, um, you know, uh, a good chunk of his discography. You know, it might bring McCartney fans together, but there are several albums that don't really cross the lines as well, if you will.
Although I think Press to Play is probably bringing more people together. Uh, there's uh, there's a Facebook group I think of people who just defend that album.
Well, there's a Facebook appreciation group for Ram as well. So
Really?
I mean, you know, yeah, there are. I mean, there are lovers of these albums. Like it's crazy. You know, I would go to the front lines for Flaming Pie any day.
Oh yeah.
You know, that was the first album that came out with me being a fan. So it was the first McCartney album that I gave a crap about, honestly. I mean, I remember hearing Hope of Deliverance on rock radio and seeing the music video on the French Much Music in the 90s.
Well,
But, you know,
Hope of
other
Deliverance
than
charted quite high here, didn't it?
it did,
I
it
think it made the
absolutely
top
did. It
10.
had an impact here, which is sort of it's cool. I mean, I love that song, and it taught me how to play a C chord on guitars. So you know, I'm ever grateful for Hope of Deliverance. But yeah, I didn't care about that song until '97 when I actually really truly became a McCartney solo fan.
So, okay, I know I'm gonna get a message from friend of the show, Tom Hunyadi, for saying this, because he always makes fun of me for talking this way. But Max, when was
Yes,
the first time you heard Ram?
I actually love the story of how Ram came into my life. Wasn't super interested in McCartney solo. At that point, I owned all the best and I owned McCartney 1. And during the summer of 1998, so like a year after, no, I owned Flaming Pie, obviously, by 1998. Yeah, I probably even owned Band on the Run. Anyway, I was a moderate Paul solo fan. I was going about it very one album at a time. And
Dipping your toes into the water.
exactly. And then summer of 98, uh, one of the dearest, most important people in my entire life, which I'm still friends with, Martin, said to me, Max, you need to hear Ram. You're going to love this album. And he had been obsessing about the album the whole length of the summer. And this was around the end of August. And he tells me about Ram, and I made it a mission to, as soon as possible, go out to Sam the Record Man and buy a copy of Ram. I still have my bill from buying it. I bought it on the 21st of August, 1998.
You're really
I
good
went
with
home.
dates.
Yes, I mean, the fact that I kept the bill inside the CD. I was looking at that yesterday because I was hoping I kept the bill because the nerd in me wanted to know when I heard it for the first time.
Oh, and now that's a historical keepsake because
Hey,
it's a receipt from the late great Sam the Record Man.
exactly. The Montreal location on St. Catherine. Man, did I ever love that shop. And so listened to Ram, and I liked the first two tracks. You know, it was like, okay, this it's cool. It's rock and roll. I like it. But the second Ram on came on. The first instrument I ever learned was ukulele, and so I have kind of a place in my heart for it.
Mhm.
And it's Paul being the twee, sort of cute Paul, but at the same time, you feel that there's a deeper meaning behind it. I didn't know the whole Paul Ramon thing at that point in my fandom, but I knew that it sounded special. Give your heart to somebody. It really grabbed me. And then from that moment on, I was like really paying attention. It wasn't just playing in my bedroom. It was like I was sitting down and listening to it. And fell in love with it. Probably played it again right after and played it again right after. And, you know, it just instantly became a favorite of mine. So that's how Ram came into my life. And the only song I knew from it, of course, was Uncle Albert Admiral Halsey from
Yeah.
All the Best. And I liked that song, but hearing it in the context of the album made me love it even more. No doubt about it.
Well, like you, my first kind of introduction to that album was through Uncle Albert. I don't remember how I listened to it. I think it was on like my mom's iPod.
Okay.
She only had a handful of McCartney tracks,
Right.
but Uncle Albert was one of them. And so I always like this song with all these weird little bits and pieces.
Yes.
It's like, we're so sorry, Uncle Albert.
Yes.
I love that from like a young
Butter
age.
wouldn't melt, so I put it in the pie.
Exactly.
Yes.
And I think the first time I actually listened to the album was my dear Uncle Paul gave me a bunch of solo Beatle records one day in an act of benevolency, and the one on the top of the stack was Ram.
Mm-hmm.
And even before I because you listeners out there you aren't able to see us.
Right.
Max just held up a copy of Ram.
Such a beautiful cover, and we'll talk more about it. But and it's the kind of cover that I would never have the guts to do myself. Because you sort of, let's put it in the hands of a graphic designer, someone that's trained to do this. But Paul, I would think a little bit of a herbal jazz cigarette in his hands as he's doing it. But gets out the markers and the glue and the scissors and puts together this montage, and it's the coolest cover ever. I love it.
Oh, it's fantastic with all this. Uh, I don't know if it looks like either paint or marker or something.
Yeah,
With
markers or paint. Yeah.
these disjointed drawings, and on the back there's two Beatles fucking.
Yes, absolutely. Very classy.
Who says that Paul wasn't able to get in on the post breakup bashing?
Oh man, and there's some snarkiness on this album that, I love
Well,
because
it starts off with his most snarky song,
exactly, most definitely.
which I feel like it carries more weight than How Do You Sleep at Night?
I think it does too, because How Do You Sleep really works strictly as a very specific knock on Paul. Whereas Too Many People can serve as a knock on, if you want it to be an anti-Trump song, it can be an anti-Trump song. It's got something, it's universal,
Mm-hmm.
a lot more than How Do You Sleep, which is so specific, talking about Yesterday and Sergeant Pepper and Another Day and, Pretty Face. And it's too specific.
Plus, it kind of blends into the Imagine album, which has, quite a few instances of John just being angry at the world and
Yes.
yelling.
And on an album that's titled Imagine and that has the most, angelic composition possibly of his career. And in that contrast, I don't find as appealing on Imagine as the kind of contrast that we're talking about appears on Ram, twee and angry.
This is like the first song on a fluffy album that got
Yes.
trashed by the press.
Yes.
It's not really it's not really what you think of when you think of Paul.
No. And yet it's the kind of Paul that we still love. I mean, that Paul, in a different way, appears on McCartney 3 with something like Lavatory Lil.
Mm-hmm.
He's clearly PO'd at someone on Lavatory Lil. I mean, he said himself that, the people in his inner circle know exactly who the song is about. So that's a snarky song as well. So he does have that in him. It just doesn't come out very often. Writing to Vanity Fair is another example, but completely different than Too Many People. I mean, Too Many People, you can sort of see him giving the finger, It's like, it's very audible on there. And I have to say, I've heard Chris Shaw, who hosts a podcast called I Am the Egg Pod,
Hmm.
I've heard him say, and I think he might be right. If you listen to the intro on headphones, it might not be piss off cake that he says, but rather piss off git. Like he was such a stupid git.
Hmm.
That sort of British.
Oh.
And if you listen to it on headphones, you can hear a t at the end of it, like a T sound that is pronounced. But again, I always tend to find that if you're listening for something, you'll hear whatever it is that you're listening for.
Hmm.
So is that what he says, or are we imagining that that's what he might be saying? I don't know,
It,
but
in the end, it doesn't matter
it
because
doesn't matter.
if you want to hear it,
Yeah,
then you hear it, and you
exactly.
like it like that. And I think that's part of what's made the Beatles so interesting over the years.
Yes, we all have our theories and we all have our own feelings about what certain songs mean and what certain songs are trying to convey.
The songs are so dense that you can
Yes.
hear what you want to hear.
And too many people is dense. It goes to all sorts of different places, um, and it has a garage feel. I mean, it's tight and it's good and it's complete, but it still has a kind of garage sound that we don't we don't hear enough of from Paul.
You
It
got the kind of raw, gritty, distorted vocals, the
Yes,
that fantastic guitar riff throughout the whole
yes,
thing. The do 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 do.
yeah.
Oh God, that guitar sounds great.
Yes, and dirty and punk. It's a little punk.
And of course, like all the best songs, it has cowbell in it.
Indeed, indeed, it does have cowbell. And the one thing that I have to mention about this song, which has nothing to do with its inclusion on Ram, but he brought it back out live, starting in I think 2005 on the Chaos and Creation tour, where he was doing it and then segging into "She Came In Through the Bathroom Window," and that was a stroke of genius. And I was lucky enough to, when I saw him in Quebec City in, I want to say 2009, but it might be 2010. It's a bit of a blur.
Hmm.
But whenever that, or 2008, yeah, I think 2008. Anyway, regardless of what year it was, he did it that night as well. Too many people followed straight into "She Came In Through the Bathroom Window." And of course, more people recognized "Bathroom Window" than they did "Too Many People," but it doesn't matter. For me, watching him do "Too Many People" live was like when you saw him do "Temporary Secretary."
Yeah.
It was one of those things that I was
How did
like,
you read my mind? How did you know I was going to bring that up?
well, I mean, you had to bring it up because it was one of those things where you were smart enough not to check the set list before. I mean, I love checking the set list before a show as well.
Mhm.
But when we don't check, we're usually rewarded for not checking because we have a sweet surprise
Mhm.
that we can't
But
beat.
but it's the same feeling, like hearing a kind of relatively deep cut
Yes.
where you wouldn't expect it.
No. And I certainly didn't expect too many people because I figured he's playing to 200,000 people. It's a free outdoor show, Quebec City. He's going to stick to the songs that everybody knows. But
Was
sure
this
enough,
like
he
the
did.
the Plains of Abraham or something?
Exactly. And he also that night did Fine Line and introduced it as, "You guys having fun? Well, we'll soon fix that." And he gave a smile to Abe and started playing Fine Line, knowing that not as many people would know it. And I love that. I love that about Paul. It's like, do more of that, you know?
Oh, I hope that I seriously hope that before, you know, Paul's done touring, he does one tour for
Yes.
the diehards
Yes.
where he can pull out some of the really deep stuff
I've
that
said
I'm sure
this,
he and his band want to play. They play some of these songs in this, sound checks.
no doubt about it. No doubt about it. And I have said this many times, and Paul himself has addressed the possibility of doing this someday. Just do a theater tour. 1,000 seaters, 5,000 seaters, smaller venues. You're going to be able to charge every bit as much, or maybe even a little more, because it's a smaller room and it's intimate or whatever. And, make it indeed a tour where it's not going to be all about Hey Jude, Eleanor Rigby, and, you know, maybe I'm amazed, but rather it's going to be about stuff like Dear Boy and Ever Present Past. I don't know. Just give us stuff that we've never heard.
If you did Eat at Home, I could die happy.
Yeah. Eat at Home is so effing good. But yeah, if we're doing a track by track, I guess now we've sort of covered too many people. Would you agree?
I think I'd say so. And that
Anything
that
else
lead
to add about it?
it's a good song.
It's a good song. I absolutely
All
love
of that stuff being said about how dense it is and hearing things you want to hear and
it.
all the
Yes,
lyrical aspect, it's just a good song.
it really is. It really is.
This is maybe why I'm not the best to, I'm not exactly a musicologist or something, but I'm I like I like this song.
So do I. Then we go to Three Legs.
We go to Three Legs.
And what are your feelings about this song?
I dig it. Kind of a slow. I hear a very heavy, kind of 50s rock and roll influence on this record.
Yes.
Everything's slathered in slapback tape echo.
Yeah. It's a little bit black. You know what I'm saying?
Well, it is very kind of 12 bar bluesy.
Yes. And yet he brings to it a flavor that is so Paul that I tend to forget that it's very 12 bar blues. It almost feels a lot more a lot weirder than that, even though I guess in actual fact it's not all that weird. It's pretty standard blues in in a sense.
Yeah.
It
But
also really conjures up images of him walking that horse up the hill. Like I was listening to it today and I was like, I definitely see long haired, beardy Paul, walking the horse with Linda and then riding it and, racing down the hills with Linda. It's a free track, very free.
I think this is the thing that really kind of draws me to this record is how strong the influence of Linda is
Yes.
here, because you can really hear Linda in this track,
Yes. Absolutely.
and that's something that kind of sadly got lost when he wasn't with Wings anymore.
Right. Absolutely.
Like even though Linda was still on the records and she would
Yeah.
still go on tour with them, you don't really hear her influence as much.
No, it's she's definitely more of an accessory on the 80s and beyond stuff for sure.
Mhm.
I find they touch that sort of wingsy magic on something like Great Day from Flaming Pie. I think that's one of the only moments where you can really feel that Linda vibe, even though it's a totally Paul track. Linda Linda's harmonies don't feel like just an afterthought. They really feel like they're part of the fabric of that song.
Mhm. This is probably something I'll keep kind of coming back to is you I feel like Paul really laid the blueprints for. I think I even said this on another show, but he laid the blueprints for what he would do with Wings on this
Yes,
album, because there
absolutely.
are certain tracks that we'll come to. It's like, okay, he was just using this template for the rest of the decade,
Yeah, most definitely.
and he had it
And
all down pat by 1971.
right. But also, I think there's a little bit of and this is something Paul has done, I think, throughout his whole entire career, but there's a bit of, well, what do people like about Paul McCartney? What do people expect from me or want from me. So there's a bit of White Album, there's a bit of Abbey Road,
But
there's a bit of
actually,
Holy Beatles.
I'm gonna make the or I'm gonna be as bold as I'll probably be in this episode. I think I'd have to disagree here.
Oh, okay.
It, uh to me, this feels like the album that it's not a matter of Paul, trying to figure out what people like. And again, this is why I think I love, McCartney too. This is an album that Paul wants to make, and
Right,
he wants to do it his way. And, that's why it got trashed in the press.
right.
But again, that's the beauty of it all.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It, you know, it. I think I hear it that way more because, like, for instance, when I hear something like "Heart of the Country," which we're going to be getting to, um, I hear a Mother Nature's Son, Blackbird, I Will sort of thing. And when I listen to something like Three Legs, I hear him in that sort of Let It Be kind of, I've got a feeling, sort of let's just, this is just a blues, but we'll flesh it out and make it interesting, and then it becomes what it is. But yes, I do agree with you that it does also really sound like he's treating himself to doing what he wants to do and what he gets him excited.
Do we have anything more to say about Three Legs?
I don't think so.
It,
It's
it, it
just a cool little bluesy number.
where does it rank in the album for you? Is
I
it one
think
of you?
it's more. I think it's more the like the bottom
Okay.
part of like if I had to rank the tracks in like an order of brilliance or whatever. But uh, as I was listening to it today, I listened to it actually three times in a row just because I was getting I know. I love the texture of it. I love what it sounds like in my ears. I love when it's just you know just before it gets really loud at the end when it's just most flies they got and it's just it's got a threat to it. It's groovy and it's jazzy and it's kind of croonerish, but then it starts like yelling and it gets heavy and it's dirty and it's punk, and it rarely I rarely take it that way because it usually just sort of plays in the background. It's not one of the tracks that stops me dead in my tracks. But when I actually really pay attention to it, I'm like, man, there's a lot going on in this track. It's really not just a 12 bar blues. It's freaking brilliant. So, hey, I love it. I love it.
Again, it's also not fair to kind of rank where these songs go because the
Right.
album's it's a masterpiece.
It
Or
really
at
is.
least I think you and I would say it's a masterpiece.
Yes, and honestly, it's one of those albums where I don't mind if someone listens to it and says, "Meh, it's okay, but it's not great." If that's their reaction to it, of course they're entitled to it. But I wouldn't want to have a super long discussion with that person
Yeah.
because, to me, it reaches me in my blood. You know what I mean? Like this
Yeah.
is really an album that I just instinctually love. I didn't have to work at this album. There are some albums that I love that I had to really put an effort into. Some of
That's kind of
Dylan's
how I am with what's an album like that? Say in the Court of the Crimson King by King Crimson.
a great example. King Crimson or Jethro Tull. I mean, I don't know why I associate those two bands, but they're two bands that I really enjoy, but I had to work at enjoying. I didn't just automatically get it immediately. Captain Beefheart is another example. I didn't immediately get Trout Mask Replica, but
Hell, I didn't get McCartney 2 at first.
no, neither did I. Neither did I. It sat on my shelf for years. I didn't even really particularly care for the studio version of Coming Up. I'd much rather, back then, listen to live versions of it. Now my mind has shifted, but yeah, you're absolutely right. There are albums that, they grow on us. Ram didn't have to really grow on me. By the time we got to the next track we're about to discuss, as I said earlier, I was in love, head over heels.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that next track,
I'm on.
it's time to talk about Ramon.
Hmm. Well, I've already talked about how much I love it. Ethan, how do you feel about Ramon?
Well, it's it's a very it's beautiful. I don't know if I'd call it my favorite track on the album. Like the two
Neither would I.
Ramon's kind of bookending,
Yes.
but it's a good bookend.
Hmm. And it's a magical bookend in a way that, maybe you have to be under the McCartney spell to find it magical
Yeah.
and not just cutesy. But to me, it's magical because it's like your big brother or your father figure telling you, hey, it's tough right now, but it's going to get better. Just stick to your guns. Actually, that's a terrible metaphor, but stick to your heart. Follow your heart. Give your heart to somebody.
Mhm.
Don't afraid to be loved, and don't be afraid to pursue. And I love that. I need to hear that once in a while, to be honest about it.
Yeah. And even though, it may not be my favorite track on the record, it certainly works with the
Oh
rest of
man,
the tracks, and
yes,
it elevates the album.
it does.
I don't think there's a track on this record that I would think like, this would be even better if they kind of swapped this out with something.
True. Although there is one track later on in the album, I'm not going to say which one, but there is a track later on in the album that continued to be a tough sell for me for years. But we'll get to that. But the other thing I want to mention about Ram On is how cool that intro is with the piano glissandos, and it's sort of like, I guess that's him just having fun fooling around on the piano. And then there's an organ part, and but then once it actually starts, okay, he coughs, clears his throat, and it starts. It has like very little focus on those instruments. Now
Yeah.
it's a ukulele showcase. I love how it just becomes a ukulele song. And the first time you hear that, it's really surprising.
Yeah, it kind of it kind of, kicks your legs out from underneath you. And it's
Yes,
like, okay, I was not expecting that.
because it's like he's warming up for honey pie or you gave me the answer, but then it's, ram on, dance tonight, like a little one instrument, one voice ditty. It
Uh,
becomes more than that. It evolves into more than that, but nonetheless, that's what it feels like at the beginning.
if memory serves me correct, you had a really good story about your relationship with Ramon in the episode Fans on the Run we did, where
Well,
you had mentioned that you'd seen McCartney live and you were in tears when he was doing Ramon on the ukulele.
yes, it was huge for me because, again, that's one of those songs that I had accepted that I would never see him do live. You know, I mean, that was just like, that wasn't even a question to me.
Mhm.
I used to still have hope that one day we'd get Uncle Albert Admiral Halsey, but I never had hope that he would ever bring out Ram On. Didn't make sense to me that he would. And then, of course, one night, he points out to a girl in the stands and says, you know what, we'll do it. And then, kicked into Ram On with Abe, if I remember correctly, playing like a pedal to sort of just do like
Mhm.
that thumping beat, and did harmonies, and Paul on ukulele singing Ram On. And yeah, I broke into tears. Like, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe we were getting Ram On. Like, what have I done to deserve Ram On in a good way?
Yeah. And now inadvertently you've gotten the Pet Shop Boys stuck in my head.
I,
They
I don't think I get the reference.
they had a song that's like, "What have I done to deserve this?"
Oh, right. Yes, yes. See, I'm not a huge, there's about 4 or 5 Pet Shop Boys songs that I really love, including one called Home and Dry, which I think is a great little companion piece to Free as a Bird for some reason, because call me crazy, But in the end of that song, you hear "We're Going Home." A voice keeps. I'm assuming it's like Neil Tennant or whatever, but there's a voice that keeps saying "We're going home," and I hear two of us, Paul, saying "We're going home." You know, at the I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're digressing here, but yes,
Well,
home
your
and dry.
homework out there, audience, is listen
Yes,
to "Free as a Bird," and what's the name of the song again?
home and dry.
"Home and Dry." Listen to those two
Home
songs.
and dry, which is an actual quote from Free as a Bird. He sings that home and dry. You know,
Well, your homework is listen to those two back to back, and email me at fansontherunpodcast@gmail.com with
there
your
you go.
feedback.
Are
And
we already moving on to Dear Boy?
I think we are moving on to Dear Boy.
I have played Dear Boy for. I had a date over at my place, and I played Pure McCartney for the date in question. This is a couple of years ago, and once we got to Dear Boy, it was like love upon first listen for the person that was sitting next to me on the couch. And I remember thinking, oh, cool. I didn't think that Dear Boy would grab someone that doesn't consider themselves a McCartney fan, but it grabbed that person's ear. So it gave me an extra love for Dear Boy, which I've always loved anyway. How do you feel about Dear Boy?
Well, this is the other one that people think of when it's like Paul kind of going after John, even if it isn't necessarily going after John.
Right.
But
And do you personally believe that it goes after John? Because I really do think that he's telling the truth when he says that it's about mostly about Linda's ex-husband.
I I think it's mostly about Linda's ex-husband, but I think a, a large portion, or not a large, but
But there's an
uh,
undercurrent.
there is an undercurrent
Yeah.
kind of directed at John. But
Yes.
what I really dig, I think it's a Leslie speaker, Paul's vocals at the start of the song,
Yes.
just kind
It's
of that warbly delight
very
that.
haunting.
hmm And
And
it's again, it's not something you expect when
no,
you put on the song. It's
true.
like, oh, whoa, what's up with his voice?
Yes. It's very true. Ah. And it's like in terms of the harmonies, it's Beach Boys level.
hmm
It really is. I mean, their harmony arrangements on that track are out of this world. Some of the very best ever that Paul participated in, Beatles included. Like I say that without hesitation.
I think I'd say so too.
It's a sea of harmonies, and it's a beautiful sea of harmonies. It's not overdone for the sake of overdoing. And he's doing so many different things with that melody, and it's a gorgeous melody. And then Linda's doing her things over and under it. It really is a spectacular track, and it's over before you've even realized it, isn't it? It's clearly under 3 minutes, isn't it?
Um, I can pull it up. It is 2 minutes and 15 seconds.
Well, there you go. It's a very, very short song, and so I think there's a lot to be said for songs that last a little, that
Yeah,
that don't overstay their welcome, and in fact leave you wanting more. And Dear Boy is definitely one of those songs that leaves you wanting more.
yeah.
And I think in the end it makes the song stronger because
Of course, if
perhaps
he did this song, now with McCartney 3, the song would have been 7 minutes long, and
well
it would have overstayed its welcome.
it's very possible. It's very, very, very possible. I
Sorry,
mean,
I swore to myself I wouldn't let my disappointment with McCartney 3 seep through too much.
well, I think we're all, you know, I think you're absolutely entitled to be disappointed. But I also predict that you'll change your mind about it in 6 months or 3 years or 10 years, you know?
I might, but it was an album that was, hyped up so
Right.
intensely,
Of course.
riding on the back of the legacy of McCartney 1 and 2,
Yes.
that everyone's like, is he going to do another McCartney 2 or McCartney 1?
Yeah.
And then he didn't really. And
No,
I tried so hard
McCartney
to
3.
really, and I'll still say I think Find My Way will, stay a McCartney classic. However,
For some,
I don't know how much I could say that for, or I don't know if I could say that for some of the other songs. Rant over.
well, I think I think Pretty Boys and Women and Wives are pretty damn strong. And I have to say, I'm completely addicted to the acoustic riffing on Long Tail Winterbird.
Mhm.
It's just a sound that I'm addicted to. I could listen to that track. I actually think haven't been a single day without listening to Long Tail Winterbird at least once a day since the album came out. I just love it.
One last thing on that record
Yes.
before I shut up about it for the next 2 months.
Yes.
Um, I feel like I would like it a lot more if Paul had just dropped the album out of nowhere.
Without
If
any
there wasn't
pre-hype.
this marketing machine behind it,
I,
I feel like I would have been like, oh wow,
yeah.
he dropped something like this out of nowhere.
Yes.
But
I,
instead, there was this elaborate marketing campaign.
yes. You know what? That you're 100% right about. I think I can't argue with that. Even though the marketing campaign got me hyped,
Hmm.
I think it was overdone.
I can't say it wasn't fun.
No,
When
exactly.
he
It was
was
a lot
putting
of
up
fun.
those billboards in cities with the sheet
Right.
music
Right. I mean,
and all the dice, like,
and having people covering the songs before the songs were even out.
yeah.
I mean, I admired people that did that. I thought of doing it myself, but I was like, I didn't dare do it. But I was very impressed. I have a friend.
Oh, I thought you were talking about McCartney 3 Imagine for a second. Or 3
No, no,
Imagine.
well, but that's cool too. But I'm talking about people
Oh
doing
yes,
it,
I remember this now.
because he gave out like he would print out like a verse or just the chorus, and then people would extrapolate and do their own thing with it. I thought that was like, wow, how did they come up with this? Because I actually heard Lavatory Lil done by Jan Arden before I heard it done by Paul McCartney. And that kind of blows my mind because
I
Jan
forgot.
Arden is a Canadian artist that I never would have associated to Paul.
I forgot that Jan Arden did it.
And she did a damn good like version of it. I loved her version of it. It was slinky, it was jazzy, it was great. And I'm like, wow, that's brilliant. But anyway, we're digressing way too much.
Well, digressing is the name of the game with me.
There you go. Yes. Um,
But
Uncle Albert?
Uncle Albert. Oh my God, Uncle Albert.
Well, so you heard it for the first time, most probably on your mom's iPod.
Yeah, when I was, you know, I probably heard this song when I was a kid, and
Right.
maybe that's why it's kind of ingrained itself in my memory with
Yes.
this intense fondness.
I'm pretty sure I heard it on my mom's radio as well as a kid. She always listened to Easy Listening, and I'm pretty sure that that's one of the songs that occasionally they would play on a station called WEZF from Burlington, Vermont. Now they're called Star 92.9, but back then they were WEZF, and I'm pretty sure I'd heard that on there before. But talk about a song that sounds like the first time you hear it, you think to yourself, man, who else does anything like this? Like, who
Yeah.
can you compare this to?
Well, I was gonna make a comparison. I think this is the closest McCartney got to something like a Bohemian Rhapsody, kind of,
Yes.
with these different parts of the songs. And I know he's done it a few times, like Band
Right.
on the Run. There's
You
a
Never
couple
Give Me
different
Your Money.
sections. Yeah. But just these kind of vignettes almost kind of put together into one song.
Yes, and vignettes with actual characters that feel kind of real. there's a sadness to the opening of Uncle Albert. You
Yeah,
know,
well,
we're so sorry. It sounds like it's touching.
it's a really sad song at first,
Indeed,
and then it goes into this like hands across the
exactly.
water.
Yeah, exactly. It's like an over the top sing along that sounds like a kid's song, but it starts out kind of like
What did I?
it's just man, what a piece. And it is like yeah, we've spoken about him doing some of these songs live through the years. It is a real sad thing that this song has never been at least tried live in front of an audience.
I hasn't it?
I don't think it has
See,
ever.
I've said that sometimes about like certain songs, and then as soon as I finish recording, I find a clip of him from like 2005 or something doing the
Right.
song. So
Well, I
I
honestly
vowed
don't
never to
think.
go on the record about Paul never doing songs.
Well, and you're wise to do so, but I honestly think he's never attempted this. Not even like a test run of it. Like I've never heard of it anyway. You would think
That
though,
seems so bizarre because out of the McCartney catalog, this is one of the more successful songs.
it is. And I can see how it would have been daunting to do it in 76. But since Paul Wickens has been part of the band,
Yeah.
there's no reason why they couldn't do it. Bunch of
I'm gonna
pre-recorded
Google
stuff.
this. I'm gonna Google this
Well,
just to make sure.
Google it. But I am pretty sure that he's never attempted this. And you're right that it's one of the best known songs of his catalog. It's still on in Quebec, in the province of Quebec. If you go into a Jean Coutu pharmacy, which is one of our biggest line of pharmacies,
I'm familiar with Jean Coutu.
well, they have it on their satellite radio station, and they've had it since I've been a conscious McCartney fan. So you can still go to Jean Coutu and hear Uncle Albert, Admiral Halsey playing on the PA system.
See, there's something for everyone in this episode.
Oh, there you go. There you go. It's some pointless trivia right there.
Yeah, but that's the best part of it, though. The pointless trivia and the anecdotes and the tangents.
Right. There you go.
Or at least that's my philosophy.
Well, and I agree. I absolutely agree. Perhaps one of the reasons why he's never tackled it, at least since the passing of Linda, is that Linda is a really important part of this.
She
There's
really shines on this
she
track.
really shines on this, and there's a bit of dialogue go the whole butter pie,
Yeah,
the butter
it
would
wouldn't be
melt.
the
So
same if like Abe was doing those
no,
parts,
I absolutely agree,
and
and
he would probably be the one to be doing those parts.
I couldn't agree more because Abe is not
Well,
afraid
he
to
took on the Linda
have
parts
fun.
for too many people.
Right. You've seen the Space Between Us DVD, right? Of Paul doing
Yes.
Too Many People.
Mhm.
Well, I invite everyone. Again, this might be a second piece of homework for everyone, but go watch the Too Many People performance from that show. They cut away to Abe during the Too Many Hungry People Losing Weight line. And that has always struck me as someone that's been up and down on the scale in terms of my weight. I always think of myself when I hear that line, too many hungry people losing weight or gaining weight, has happened a bit during the lockdown. But yeah, I always thought that it was weird that they cut away to Abe on that line, Abe being the only kind of bigger guy in the band.
Yeah.
It's a weird editing choice right there.
Well, does this lead us into Smile Away?
Yes, most definitely. By the way, did you find anything on Google about Uncle
I
Albert?
did not find anything.
Yeah, I really don't think they've ever tackled. I could see the guys suggesting, "Hey, let's try this," but I think Paul shot it down immediately for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Because I don't think vocally would be too hard to sing. I could be wrong, but I don't think it would be too hard for present day McCartney
Could you
to do.
imagine some sort of like weird parallel universe where he's like sat Heather Mills down in front of a keyboard and brought her out on tour?
Oh my goodness. I've kind of thought of that. I remember wondering at the time if maybe that had happened, before the 2002 return tour, um, might he have asked Heather, hey, you want to join me on stage and sing harmonies on a couple of songs, maybe play some keys? I doubt he did, but it's not impossible. It's not impossible. Maybe he did.
Who knows? Hopefully not.
Actually, a little parentheses to be done with this. I kind of wish he had invited Nancy to sing along on something from McCartney 3. To be honest about it, even if she doesn't want to sing
Hmm.
or particularly is interested in singing, I'm just saying just to have her voice on there as a symbolic thing. I think that could have been a nice little touch. On Laboratory Lil, she could have been part of that choir that repeats after him.
I think she might have been on New, the Everybody Out There, where everyone's kind of.
Right. Oh, that's possible. That's
Well, because
absolutely
I know
possible.
like most of his kids were on that.
Well, there you go, and it makes sense to me. That because that's the kind of thing that why wouldn't you want to capture that and immortalize that on record? Especially if you're Paul McCartney, your whole life has been immortalized on record since the age of 14 or 15, more or less. So
Yeah.
yeah, Smile Away, right?
Yeah.
Love it. And to be honest about it, it's one of the least interesting tracks on the album, I would say. Like, he's not reinventing any wheels with this,
Yeah.
but there is such a drive and energy, and again, a lot of acting. There's a lot of acting on this album. What I mean by that is him doing different voices.
Yeah.
Like Smile Away, he's clearly playing a character. Like, I can smell your feet a mile away. He's not just being Paul. He's play acting. He's having fun, and you can hear that on this track. And I love it all the more for it.
And it's again kind of like what was I talking about? It was Three Legs.
Yeah.
Another kind of 12-bar bluesy, probably not
Yes.
12 bars, but another kind of 50s rock and roll kind of thing, slathered in tape echo, all
Yes.
that lovely stuff.
You can close your eyes to Smile Away and imagine Let It Be era Beatles doing this,
Hmm.
and John doing some of the more nasally kind of Linda-ish harmonies. Um, and it's on Smile Away that he does the I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
Don't know, that's brilliant. And I only picked up on the fact that that's what he was singing like maybe a year ago or 2 years ago. Because it always sounded to me like just scatting, down, na, 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 na. But
Yeah.
they're saying real words. Don't know how to do that and learning how to do that.
It makes sense though, or kind of what you were saying. I can close my eyes and imagine them at Twickenham doing
Absolutely.
this.
Yes. Everyone's sort of, having a laugh and having fun with it. Paul hamming it up and, Ringo just
Yeah.
hitting those drums and John having a real smirk and having fun doing this song. They would have sounded terrific doing this song.
Mhm. There's certain songs that are on solo records that you're like, oh, this sounds Beatley, but then
Yeah.
there's other ones that sound like this could have been really cool if the Beatles had done this together.
Yes.
And they don't necessarily have to sound Beatley.
True. Very, very true. And we haven't mentioned the musicians on Ram, but man, Denny Sywell on drums is absolutely brilliant throughout. And the tracks that Spinoza plays lead guitar on are fantastic, and the tracks that Hugh McCracken play guitar on. And I have to admit, I don't know by heart who plays guitar on which tracks. It's one of those things that I have to consult, one of my Paul books in order to be sure of. I had one laying around a little earlier that I can't find now. But anyway, yeah, I always have to reference like, oh, who is that playing guitar? But I mean, the band is smoking on Ram. They sound dirty and yet tight throughout the entire album. And that's one of the reasons why this album is so great.
Have you heard the new Denny Sywell Ram On?
I've heard two tracks from it, and I thought it sounds great, but the covers are so loyal to the originals that even though I'm envious that they got to do that, all of these musicians, like how much would I love to participate in a show like this? Like it's great that they've done this and that they invited Denny Sywell to drum on it is just wonderful. But honestly, hey, I'll listen to the original album. If I were there seeing them watching, performing this live, I would eat it up, and I'm glad they did it. But I'll just stick to the original, to be honest about it.
I think it's a nice, treat for the 50th anniversary.
Yes.
Though.
Yes.
And I'm glad they did it. Because it's a nice companion piece to Ram.
Yes, and it's also
it's
nice.
It's not a substitute for Ram.
No, it's a companion piece. It's a beautiful homage, and it's also a reminder to Mr. Paul McCartney himself that you should be doing some of these songs live.
Yeah.
And
honestly, it also kind of feels, a little interesting in the wake of Three Imagined. It's like, why don't you do a cover album of songs people know and like?
Well, I will. I'm going to resist going on a whole tangent about that.
That's a whole nother show.
It really is. I enjoy Three Imagine, but I'm not over the moon about it. But I am over the moon about McCartney 3. So, we kind of differ on that one. But to get back to Ram, Smile Away, and anybody covering any of these songs to me is a beautiful thing because these really are songs worth celebrating, and they're worth celebrating every bit as much, if not more so, than some of his classics.
Yeah.
So yes, not many people know Smile Away and Dear Boy, and unless you're a real McCartney fan. But man, are we ever grateful that these songs exist, because I'd take them over some of his classics in some cases.
Well, I don't know if I have that much more to say about Smile Away, but
no,
I do have quite a bit to say about the next song.
Oh my goodness.
Heart of the Country.
Yes. Some of my favorite acoustic guitar playing on any recording by any artist ever. And I'm kind of a little bit, kind of sad that it's not Paul 100%. Like I wish this was a McCartney track in the sense that I wish he was responsible for every little sound that you hear on this record. But of course, I do believe in this case it is Spinoza that's playing the lead guitar, and that riffing, that soloing that he scats over is just brilliant.
Yeah,
isn't it?
Well, this is I mentioned earlier in the show that there's certain songs on this record that sound like blueprints for what happened with Wings.
Yes,
and the thing is, I'm trying to remember, because sometimes I name tracks, but then I butcher the name of the track and I end up saying the wrong one.
Go ahead.
On Wings at the Speed of Sound.
Yes.
Was it She's My Baby? She's my...
Quite right, yeah.
Yeah, She's
quite
My
possibly.
Baby. I heard this, or that long before I heard Ram. And so
Okay.
when I first heard Heart of the Country, it's like, oh, this sounds like that one song.
Right. Well, it's definitely one of those songs that you can absolutely imagine Paul just, sitting in his little corner with his acoustic guitar and creating this song in 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever. And that doesn't make it any less brilliant. On the contrary, it's an absolute perfect song. What it sets out to do, it does, and then some.
Hmm.
It's a gorgeous song. And if it were on the White Album, it would be every bit as adored as Blackbird. I mean, maybe it doesn't have as much weight, I guess, because of course Paul has gone with the whole civil rights
Yeah.
movement with Blackbird. Who knows if that was really on his mind when he first wrote Blackbird? And I'm not here to debate that,
Yeah.
but it's given Blackbird an extra weight that you could never get from Heart of the Country, I guess. But just as a record, man, this is Beatle level,
Hmm.
and
I
then
feel like it would have made the White Album better if it was in the place of like Honey Pie, if I'm
oh
being honest.
yeah, yeah, I'm totally willing to go along with that. It's definitely a highlight. And when it first appeared on Wingspan, when they put out Wingspan, I was thrilled because that was one of the tracks that I was like, man, I hope this makes a few people wake up and realize how great the song is. And I remember it also giving me hope that maybe the next time he was going to tour, which ended up being, 2002, so like pretty much at the same kind of time as Wingspan, maybe a year after Wingspan. I remember I was thinking, oh, maybe this means that he'll bring this song back. I'd love to hear Heart of the Country in his acoustic portion.
Do you think he could still pull it off with
Well,
the high
I think it would
notes?
I think it would be very tough to pull off now, and I'd rather he stick to the original arrangement than do, because didn't he redo Heart of the Country or a short excerpt of it around Chaos and Creation?
I think so.
Like he did like a little well, like a re-recording of that track. But anyway, I remember it was sung completely differently, so I wouldn't want him to reinvent Heart of the Country. Heart of the Country is perfect as it is on Ram.
And
Could he
well,
pull it off
that's the
vocally?
good thing
Maybe
about
not.
that's the thing I
Excuse
love
me?
about McCartney's touring band is that they
Yes,
play the songs very faithfully.
very faithful. Yes. And it's fun also on the few tracks where they sort of dare to do something a bit different. I don't know if you ever heard him do Here, There, and Everywhere. For a year or two, he would do it sitting at the piano,
Hmm.
which kind of like changed the sound of Here, There, and Everywhere. It sounded all of a sudden more like, obviously, like a piano ballad
Yeah.
because he was doing it on the piano, but it gave the song a different dynamic. And they've dared to change around ever so slightly a few songs along the way. Very rarely, but they have, and I do find it fun when they do that.
Hmm.
But yeah, Heart of the Country. I mean, what else can be said? It's a perfect song, and it immediately brings to mind those images of Paul and Linda walking on the beach with Martha,
Yeah.
the dog, and them just being beautiful and in love and free and hairy, you know, and just country life. I love putting that song on every road trip. If we're going to the country or some place that's a little bit more in the nature, I want to hear Heart of the Country, because that to me is like it's the idyllic. It makes you dream where the holy people go. That's where I want to go.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, the next song on the record for the longest time, this was my favorite song on the thing, which I
Right.
don't think should come as a surprise to anyone who is familiar with my show.
Right.
And although it's now its spot has been challenged by another song, but we'll get to that when we get to that.
Right.
But Monkberry Moon Delight. Oh my
Oh,
god, Monkberry
yeah.
Moon Delight.
And what is it? It's a song about a milkshake that he used to make for his kids. Is that what the Monkberry Moon Delight is? Maybe. But then it becomes this whole dark thing about the sinews and the nerves and the dreadful cantata. And it's got all of these cool sounding words, which is such a Paul thing. He hears words that he likes the sound of, and then he he sticks them together in this hodgepodge of abstract poetry, but it's brilliant, and it does not feel forced. It never feels forced. It just feels like a real, screamer that just is coming from his heart and from every bit of his being. God, it's a great recording also. I mean, it could not be better.
I can't get enough of this song. It's just it's Monkberry Moon Delight.
Yeah,
It's it just catches you off guard though.
it really does. And it doesn't sound like him singing. Especially if you're new to McCartney, or you're just sort of learning how he's the man of a thousand voices.
I'll
Um,
admit, after I listened to Ram for the first time, I kind of forgot about it for a few years.
right.
And then it was only I only really rediscovered this song after I heard it on the Sirius XM Beatles channel
Right.
around like 2017 or 2018. It came
Right.
on, and I'm like, what the hell is this? It's like, oh wait, no, this was on Ram.
Yeah. Yeah.
'Cause
And I
it's just
mean, it's just,
that riff, and it's just kind of it's delightfully clunky.
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, it's clunky in a way that you would expect like early 80s Tom Waits to be, not Paul McCartney. And
yeah,
yet here it is, Paul McCartney back in 1971, just a few months after the Beatles. And he's like, maybe there's a bit of Oh Darling and Long Tall Sally Paul in there, but it's a whole other beast. I
yeah,
mean, it's a creepy attic covered in cobwebs Paul. It's a
yeah.
fictional Halloween Paul. It's a Paul that we, I don't think, ever encounter again in his whole entire catalog.
I wish this Paul would make a return.
Oh, most definitely. And I think 80-year-old or 78-year-old McCartney still has a capacity to go there with his new, older, mature
Because
voice.
this is the weird Paul McCartney.
It is the weird
This
Paul
is this
McCartney.
to me is the same Paul that did Ubu Jubu.
Yes, and the same Paul that did bogey music,
Yeah,
and most of McCartney too. It's the Paul that perhaps is under the influence of grass
yeah,
or
or
whatever it
the
is.
herbal jazz cigarettes.
Oh, those herbal jazz cigarettes are definitely rearing their head here. And he's sitting at the piano and just having a great time. And I mean, that's what you want when you're a McCartney fan, is Paul just letting loose and letting it rip.
Exactly.
So yeah,
It's hard finding more things to say about this song other than it's Monkberry Moon Delight.
it's Monkberry Moon Delight, and it's
It leaves you in a trance.
exactly, and it's killer piano, it's killer drums, killer bass,
That
killer
that
vocals.
guitar though.
Oh man, it is relentless. Yes, it's relentless and engaging, and it's an earworm. It's everything. It's absolutely. I mean, what an effing masterpiece.
Yeah. I had said this song was my favorite, but its spot has been kind of challenged, and it's been challenged by the next song, "Eat at
Wow,
Home."
eat at home.
This is the other major song that when I rediscovered it, it's like, okay, so he had Wings mapped out from 71.
Most definitely,
This
because
easily sounds like 1975, 1976. Wings over America, Wings at the Speed of Sound, Paul.
Junior's Farm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got that chugging kind of thing.
Mhm.
It's very ready for the stage.
That kind
And
of grittier voice with the Linda harmonies.
yes, absolutely. And that gritty voice is so much fun because, again, you can hear him acting. And my God, I don't think I talked about the acting on Monkberry, but obviously there's acting there. And there's acting here again at Eat at Home because he's being particularly raunchy.
Hmm.
And he's he's really just playing that sort of crooner, you know, that sort of guy from uh, you give him, you know my name, look up the number, you know, like
Yeah.
he's having fun with it, and he's hamming up on that mic, and you know, man, it's fun hearing him sing this.
Yeah. Oh,
And I'm assuming you've heard the live version from I guess 1972, Wings Over Europe or whatever that is.
yeah.
It's great. Like you wish that he had kept this on the set list for years.
This is one that I'd like to see him pull out of his bag of tricks
Most definitely.
next
And
time, or sadly, if he comes around again on tour.
right. And I think his current voice could handle this. I mean, it would sound different, but it could work.
Yeah.
It absolutely could work.
And again, if we're talking in all honesty, you know, even if his voice isn't, 100% up to the task, his band is quite good at masking that.
Most definitely. And they make it lift off as a performance and as an energetic beast, like every single night and on every single track. I've yet to hear a performance that's not exciting from that band. I mean, sure, we get bored with the umpteenth version of Hey Jude and the umpteenth version of Lady Madonna, but I mean, it's still such a rock solid, fun band that audibly is having fun playing together. That playing something as raucous and fun as Eat at Home or A Smile Away, these things would sound great
Yeah.
and would not be challenging for these extraordinary musicians. They could play this without even rehearsing it.
It wouldn't surprise me if this is one of the songs that they've done in like a sound check
It
somewhere.
wouldn't surprise me either. It would make sense. With Paul probably flubbing the lyrics, but just having a good old laugh and having fun with it.
Hmm. That's one of my big regrets is that I know all these people who have gone to the McCartney sound checks. I
Right.
wish I had gone to one of those.
I wish I'd gone to one of those as well, but I will say two things about the McCartney sound checks, which sort of make me go, really? And those two things are I've heard and seen pictures that the seats are always terribly far from the stage during the
Yeah.
sound checks. They're crazy far from the stage. Like you're still on the floor, but I mean they're at the back end of the floor seats from what I've seen. So that I don't know. I mean, I'd love the opportunity to have him as up close and personal as possible. Personally, I'm not, um, and then the second thing is, and this connects to what I just said about being up close and personal, is those prices.
Yeah.
If you're going to be paying those prices, I mean, shouldn't you be able to, get some of his spit when he sings, and sort of, you know what I mean? Like, if I'm going to pay those prices, I want to be as close as is comfortable for him. If
I
he's
want to
done it
be
at a
on
meet on
stage with
records,
Paul if I'm paying that much.
well, pretty much, So yeah, those are my two sort of like about the sound checks. But I mean, don't get me wrong. I see that he regularly does Coming Up in his sound checks, and Coming Up is one of my absolute favorite key songs ever by any artist. It was number one the day I was born. So I would love to have him do Coming Up, and I'd love to see him do Midnight Special and Matchbox. And even though I'm not crazy about those songs, hey, it's Paul, and it's Paul doing the songs of his youth.
Yeah.
I'm there.
What more is there to say about Eat at Home?
Right. Um, what's next? What's
What's
the next
next?
track?
Long haired lady, I think, would be next.
Okay, well, Long Haired Lady. I'm looking forward to knowing how you feel about the song. But this is the one song that for years, I'm almost ashamed to admit this, but for quite a few years, I would sequence it out of the album.
Yeah.
I used to program the CD, like back when CDs were the only way I listened to music, basically. I would program it out just because to me, it just sort of lingered on a little too long,
Well,
and it
it goes
kind of
for over 6 minutes.
it goes for over 6 minutes, and it to me it sort of kills the exciting momentum and drive that the album has had throughout. Even something as twee as Ram On still has a drive, and even the early part of Uncle Albert, even though it's a ballad and we discussed that it was sort of sad in its opening, it's still driving because it's a hit, it's a classic. Whereas Long Haired Lady always felt to me like, okay, a little, we're headed towards Wings of Wildlife
Yeah.
with Long Haired Lady. You know, a little editing could have maybe improved the song. That being said, I now listen to it and think, this is a masterpiece. It's beautiful. The harmonies, it's clever. It's different, and this is something that is brand new for me as a listener. As I was listening to it this afternoon, I thought to myself, you know how you always talk about Ram being the blueprint for what's to come?
Yeah.
There's a bit of silly love songs in here, in the way that he's doing Love Is Long while he's singing Winter, Summer, Love Is Long.
Oh,
There's like distinct parts that are being sung at opposites.
I can hear
It
that.
sort of predicts how on silly love songs he's going to do, and then you gave me more, you gave it all to me. And then with Linda singing I love you and all of those things, those three voices, he does that on Long Haired Lady
Yeah.
to some extent.
I agree with you though. It goes on a little too long. It kind of meanders. But again, even if it isn't one of my favorite tracks, it doesn't hurt the album.
No, it doesn't hurt the album, and it changes enough
Mhm.
at enough little places, like throughout the
Like if
song.
you had dropped this song on Wildlife, I think it would have made Wildlife better. But it doesn't hurt Ram.
Well said. Very, very well said. But yes, it could fade out about a minute and a half earlier,
Yeah.
and that wouldn't have hurt it either.
No.
I think it might have even sort of helped it, at least helped the song. I'm not saying help the album. The album doesn't need help.
No.
It's perfect. But, if we're being honest here, this could have been edited down for sure.
I agree.
And how many times have you listened to that song and thought to yourself, yeah, love is long, so is this track, Paul?
Yeah.
I think we've all made that joke to ourselves listening to it. I mean, he repeats it often enough that at least once you're going to think, oh, yeah, and so is this song.
It's it's not a feeling I especially like when it comes to Paul. It's like, oh, when will this song just fucking end already? That's
Right.
a feeling I usually reserve for when I'm listening to prog. And I
Yes.
like prog, but
Yes.
it's like, okay, Peter Gabriel. This
Yeah.
song could have ended about a minute and a half ago.
Right. No kidding. No kidding.
Yeah. But
So,
this we already kind of covered Ram On, and
yes.
it
But I have to say, the Ramon reprise, the fact that at the end, I mean, and I don't know exactly what he's saying, but in your left ear, when you're listening to it on headphones, you hear him say something to the effect of, then here's a bit of a new song. And then he starts on the, who's that coming around the corner? Who's that come? That really
yeah.
high part. And that makes me wish that Wings Wildlife would open with Big Barn Bed and not um, Mumbo. I mean, I like Mumbo, and we're not going to get into that, but you know, he's telling you, hey, I've got more songs, so stay tuned. I'm going to be back real soon with some more songs for you. Just the fact that he's teasing at Big Barn Bed, it's just wonderful to me.
I agree.
And I didn't pick up on it the first time I listened to Ram because I didn't own Red Rose Speedway yet. Therefore, I was not at all familiar with Big Barn Bed, had never heard it. So I just remember thinking, oh man, this is a cool sounding line. Who's that coming around the corner? Who's that coming around the bend? I remember thinking, man, what is this song, and is it going to be anything? And of course, it was something.
Yeah. Oh, it's a good something.
It's a very good something indeed.
And with that, I think we should close it out with the backseat of my car.
Backseat of my car, which apparently he was testing out with the Beatles as early as 68, 69. Apparently he was playing around with that melody and had, I think, the opening lines to the song, but it wasn't quite finished. But this, when I first heard Ram, was my favorite song on the album.
Mm-hmm.
No doubt about it. Because this is the ultimate long and winding road, golden slumbers. This is the epic McCartney closer of your dreams, of my dreams anyway.
Mm-hmm.
However, now that I've been listening to this album for since I guess '98, now once in a while I don't feel like listening to Backseat of My Car. I have to admit, I think I've listened to it so many times over the years. I've made it part of so many playlists throughout the years that it has lost a bit of its charm. That being said, I mean, I still think it's one of the most outstanding pieces of music he's ever put on record, and I love it, and I wouldn't change a thing about it. But it has unfortunately lost a bit of its magic through repeated listening over the years. What's your experience with this song?
Well, I've only really kind of gotten into it in the last couple of years.
Okay.
It didn't really grab me when I was younger.
Okay.
But that haunting kind of piano and the guitar with the phaser.
Yes.
It's fantastic.
It's very haunting, and it really does take you to where he's talking about, alone on the highway. You can be sitting on your couch at home, or sitting on your or just on wherever you are. You're transported on that lonely road in the middle of the night with whoever you're in love with when you're listening to the song. And I think it's really beautiful and poignant when he mentions the father in the song, about, and listen to your daddy's song, Making Love. We believe, Making Love. Man, why am I getting the words screwed up? I've listened to this song a million times. Anyway, it's just beautiful. It's very Brian Wilson-esque, how it's like a teenage tale,
Yeah.
It's beautiful, and it's very cool to think that this is, I guess, 30-year-old or 31-year-old McCartney, or almost 30-year-old Paul McCartney, writing from a very adolescent perspective, but beautifully.
He was only, I think, about 20. It was this recorded in late 70 or early 71?
I guess late 70, and I think a bit in January, February, according to the recording guide there.
He would have been under 30 then.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. Like 28, 29-year-old Paul.
Yeah. He probably still felt a bit like a teenager deep down in his heart back then, And he definitely evokes that in this song, and he does so beautifully.
It's a great song.
And it's so whimsical we could end up in Mexico City.
Yeah. But Paul is, when Paul does an album closer right, he does it right.
Oh man, does he ever.
Oh, yeah.
Does he ever. I think it's very hard to think of an artist that has a better sense of album structures than Paul. I think he's up there with some of the best in terms of sequencing albums and in terms of making sure that, oh, we're missing this in the collection of songs, so I'm going to go and I'm going to write a closer, or I'm going to, and he saved this song for Ram. I mean, because I'm sure that it was nearly ready in his brain, at least much earlier than 1971,
Mm-hmm.
or much earlier than the Ram sessions. It could have been on McCartney, probably. Could have been on maybe even Let It Be. Who knows?
With that being said, this was a good way to spend the 50th anniversary.
I absolutely agree, and honestly, I'm grateful that uh, went with my idea. And of course, it's best to wrap it up now. But I mean, someday
And
maybe
we haven't even touched on the
Thrillington.
single
The
Another
singles,
Day.
yes,
We
Another
didn't
day,
touch
and
on
Oh Woman Oh Why.
Thrillington.
Oh Woman Oh Why is probably in the top 5 of his most punk moments ever. I mean, it's nothing like punk, but it's a punk
Yeah.
recording. Like, it's so raw. But yeah, someday we'll talk some more, Ethan, I'm sure, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I am planning on my own podcast somewhere down the line. I'm still looking into different possibilities. So if you're willing, I'll definitely have you a guest on my own show someday.
I'd love that.
There you go.
And I'm always up for talking, Beatle or solo Beatle. So
Yes. And we also share common interests in terms of other musicians. So, that could be worth exploring as well.
well, I'll take you up on that offer.
You are a young man of fine taste, Ethan.
You sound like my record dealer.
So yeah, thanks again, man, and happy Ramiversary to everyone out there listening to this.
Even though this may not be posted on the Ramiversary, it's still the Ramiversary week.
It's all good. Whenever you're listening to this, it's Ramiversary. Just
you
put
could be listening
Ram
to this
on
in,
and
you
go
could be
for a
listening
ride
to this
with
in
Paul.
2 months, and it would still be the
Yes.
Ramiversary.
Yes, it's the 50th anniversary, and it is until May 17th, 2022, really.
And with that being said, thank you for listening. You can go home now.